Well, hello there. Uh, this is my first attempt at using this YouTube technology. Hope you'll bear with me as I work this out. Uh, I wanted this particular presentation to be at the top of the list, so it'd be the first thing you look at when you start to look at some of the other presentations that we put on this YouTube channel. And what I want to do is tell you why I'm doing this. I could be doing other things. Trust me. I mean, I've got other interests besides this, but this seems to consume a bit of my time, quite a bit of my time. Anyway, what I wanted to review with you is, not only why am I doing this, but why are you listening to this, and what will you do as a result of the information that you receive? So again, what we've done over the years is to put together educational material that might assist you in your efforts in some of the situations that you find yourself in. It's been said that a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing, and my experience has told me that it is. And so many people will run before they're able to walk, for instance, trip and fall down and injure themselves. So uh, as you analyze what it is that you need and what you would like to come out of this whole process with, then certainly you should structure yourself in that way so that you come out with what it is that you're looking for. It would be the ideal world if we never had to use any of this. But as circumstances are, then in many instances we're forced into a position where we have to do certain things. Now, one observation I'll make real quick is that you know the difference between people and rocks or trees or animals, and that is people are capable of acting for themselves, whereas most all other creatures and things we find around us here on the planet are uh, are reacting. For instance, in the fall, the leaves turn colors. Uh, the mailman comes to the door, the dog starts barking, all those kind of things. And so we see the difference then. But also, that ability to act for oneself also implies the responsibility that you have when you act. So it's one thing, if the dog bites the mailman, but it's a whole lot different thing if I bite the mailman. There's a world of difference there. Just a little bit of humor. Anyway, my experience has been this whole process. Actually, I started studying on some of these matters in 1998, and so not a whole lot of information on these particular subjects were available at that time, but over a period of time, and more things came out. And certainly by this date here in 2013, there's a massive amount of information that's available to study so that you can make choices. Now, people sometimes, for whatever reason, want to choose up sides. Some say, well, Winston's right, or Bob over here is right, or Mary over here is right. Well, how about you? Are you right? And so, we try to be as fair as we can with the information we put out to try to give what has worked in certain circumstances. If something is experimental, I'll tell you it's experimental. If something has good reason and logic behind it, I'll tell you. And so, but then again, what use you make of it is based upon what decision you make. So are you reacting or are you acting? And so that responsibility is upon you. Now, just for a minute here, I want to perhaps make reference to history. Uh, seems like people learn the very best when they have examples to look at of what other people have done. And I've always been a student of history. I love to read about the experiences of other people. We got people in covered wagons going across the plains. We've got astronauts getting on a rocket and going to the moon and all kinds of things. And so it's very interesting to see how people deal with those things and how those things affect them. And so we can learn. We can learn from other people's successes, and we can learn from other people's failures. And so that's why we have history, and that's why we study it. Now, of importance in our history here in what we call America, or the United States of America, or however you want to call this place, uh, we have a history basically that starts when the Europeans first started uh, immigrating to North America, and in particular, the various ones that came and formulated states, or what was called colonies. But in any event, there was a certain amount of debt that was incurred, by these early colonists. Some of it, like we have East India Trading Company, the Hudson Bay Company, certainly the Bank of England factored into that. We had, oh my goodness, all kinds of, Treaty of Paris, Louisiana Purchase. I mean, we had so many different things that were debt items, situations. And so the question got to be, with the formulation of governments, how did the governments deal with those debts? Now, the first attempt to deal with the debt here in the United States of America was under the Articles of Confederation, whereas the corporate government, and it was always a corporation, folks, whether you want to call it a de jure government or a de facto government, it's always a corporation. And so that corporation, however you perceive it, was created to carry the debt that had been incurred by the colonists. And so the rules and regulations of that debt were formulated in what was known as the Articles of Confederation. And then they later expanded upon that with what was known as the Constitution for the United States of America. Yeah, I think a lot of you are pretty much familiar with some of those things that had happened and so forth. Now later on we get into other situations, certainly after the what was called the war between the states, and that whole thing was mislabeled. That war was the federal government against the states. In any event, there were other things that happened as a result of that. For instance, you go study the events around Washington, D.C. in 1871, what happened in 1878, what happened in 1903, what happened in 1913. These are all important eras and points in history that have led to the circumstances as we find them now. So it's not taught in school. I mean, I went all the way through school, 16 years at school, and I never heard any of this stuff. I mean, wow, how'd that happen? But in any event, I now have the opportunity to study it, and so I do. But the reason I bring those things up is because of the impact that those circumstances have on me today. And so how do I deal with those things? And so that's why we put this educational program to get together, is to explain how these situations could be dealt with for your betterment. So that's why we do it. Anyway, let's look here. For instance, what's the latest hot potato? The mortgage foreclosures. Mortgage foreclosures are affecting so many people up and down the street all across the country, and it's not just here in this country. It's all over the planet. I mean this scheme, this conspiracy that was created by the bankers has affected a lot of people, and it's a real tragedy. This didn't need to happen. This because of the greed and of okay, that's far enough of that. But you see what's happened because of the circumstances, and so that's the latest. That's the latest hot potato we've been dealing with as far as dealing with debts and so forth. Not that it didn't exist before, but it became so rampant after 2008 that we had to get busy and look for solutions. different ways to keep people in their keep families and so forth in their homes. We don't need, you know, the population out here living in tents. We don't need the people living out here under the underpass. I mean, that's ridiculous. So anyway, you know, as we've gone along, we've helped to develop, you know, some thought processes, technologies, and so forth to assist people in their necessities, which is shelter. Let's see. Let me go back over a little bit of the history here with what happened because I want to get into the concept of what's known as discharge of debt. As I mentioned, 1933 was a key date. Uh, what had happened was that the owners of the gold that had been loaned and put forth by individuals, some of them families, some of them, you know, quasi-government kind of situation. Anyway, a lot of gold was put up to underwrite the financials of the planets, the currencies, and so forth. And in the estimation of those who were the owners and who had loaned it out, it was not being used properly. Obviously, it wouldn't be used properly because Southeast Asia was still victimized by colonialism. And so it kind of upset. I mean, I'd be upset too, the way those people were treated and have been treated. So the owners of the gold said, "Well, we're taking it back," and so they made an effort then to recall or reclaim the gold that had been put up, you know, to guarantee those financial systems and so forth, and that's what caused the Great Depression. A lot of you have studied, you know, the Great Depression. My parents both lived through it. Both of them lived on the farm. Actually, I asked my mother what was it like living through the Great Depression. She said, "Well, we didn't know there was a depression." Said we had everything we needed. They said the only thing we didn't have was money. It's kind of an interesting concept. But in any event, we had the Great Depression going on. You know, certain things needed to be done, so the President of the United States stepped in, took certain measures in that regard. Now, uh, as you study history, you may come to the conclusion that what was done was good, or you may come to the conclusion that what was done was evil. And, you know, that's your point of view. Sometimes it's important for us to go back and put ourselves in their place and say, you know, what would I have done? What would you have done? If you'd have been the President of the United States during that period of time, what would you have done? Now, see, if you can't come up with a better solution than FDR came up with, then you ought not be criticizing him. Let some of the rest of us that have better solutions criticize them. Only joking here. But in any event, we had that circumstance that came up. But because of the removal of gold from the financial system, there had to be a remedy put in place uh, to replace that ability to pay a debt. And so as a result of that, they came up with a remedy which is basically embodied in House Joint Resolution 192. I think a lot of you are pretty familiar with that. That'd be House Joint Resolution 192 of 5th of June 1933. But as a result of that, uh, and you can go read it. There's quite a bit to that. A couple of main points that come out of it. Number one, you can't pay a debt with a debt. Now, is that an important thing to know? Yes. You can't pay a debt with a debt. And the other concept you have to come to grips with is that the fact that you can't pay a debt is payment in fact. Now, this is a hard one for people to understand, but certainly, you know, those who are involved in most of your Christian religions and understand the concept of mercy and grace, you should be familiar with that concept because uh, uh, you know, this concept is very much like the concept that's been expressed in the doctrine of grace. So anyway, we had all these things that happened, and we've spent years, I mean, the last 8 years, uh, developing the thought process, developing the education, bringing in solutions to some of those things, techniques, technologies, and so forth that could be utilized Probably the one that's most familiar to people is the accepted for value technology. It's an administrative process, private administrative process, by the way, uh, to deal with these situations. And I think some of you probably have looked at our accepted for value DVDs. I just reviewed them just a while back. I really liked them. Anyway, don't want to take a whole lot of time with this little introduction. I just wanted to bring some items to your attention to give you an idea of some of the presentations and so forth that you'll be looking at. I think some of you perhaps have already looked at some of the presentations here that we have on our YouTube channel. Those are basically clips from some of the DVDs, seminars, and so forth that we've done in the past. And so I wanted to do this one more than anything else to kind of give you a heads up. And that heads up has to do with uh, taking responsibility for yourself, not jumping. Don't leap before you look, and certainly don't swim in deep water unless you're a good swimmer. We have people do some of the most audacious things that I can ever imagine, and then they call me up, say, hey, I'm swimming in 100-foot deep water. What do I do? So my first question is, why did you get in that deep for? You know, you probably should have stayed in the kiddie pool. And so we have these things come up, and so that's more or less what I'm trying to bring to your attention. Is that uh, I spent 16 years in school, folks, from the first grade all the way through college, and after I got out of college, I realized I didn't know hardly anything. And so it's the same thing with some of these technologies and thought processes that we'll be presenting on various subjects in regards to commerce and so forth. And that is, don't overthink yourself. Please, don't uh, run before you can walk. I mean, it was let's see, it was about just about 2 years of study, 2 years before I ever filed a UCC1 financing statement. 2 years it took me to get to that point where I was confident enough in myself to do that. And we got people now that take a look at one video or something like that. Now here, filing all kinds of things, and so I discourage that. I discourage unless you have an emergency, unless your back is against the wall, please, take the time to study and to go through some of these things. All right, like I say, on any of these things that we talked about here, we could spend, days and days. Well, we have spent days and days on these things, and that's why we produced all those DVDs and seminars and all that kind of stuff. But I just want to give you just a little bit of a, maybe a good word or a jump start in your thought process as you attempt to move forward to study some of these technologies and so forth. Well, I'd like to spend more time with you. I didn't intend actually to take this long. And so, like I say, any of these subjects that I talked about today, we could very well spend hours and days developing the whole subject matter and so forth. But in any event, it's good to be with you. It's good to be able to broadcast out there into video land. Uh, sometimes I get pretty wore out, but I still have a good feeling if I think that some effort that I'm taking or something I've done, something I've said, has helped someone. And so my advice, my uh, the way I look at it is that if I have helped you, then you go help somebody else. In the first instance, that's how I learned much of what I know today. Was I couldn't possibly come up with all the problems that everybody came up with, and so somebody would come to me with a situation, say, "How do we solve this?" And I say, "Well, I don't know, but let's work together on this. Let's study this out and see what we can do with it." And so over a period of several years, working with different people, different situations, circumstances they came up, then I started to get experience. I started to have experiences that I never would have had all on my own. So it's a smart thing to do to study together with others. The internet's a good way to find, and to talk and to go back and forth with people. I mean, I've known people that had study groups and on the internet, and they the people would actually physically be all over the planet, and so that's a good thing to do. So anyway, thanks for your time, and I hope we can be of service to you.